Good afternoon, everyone. Illinois Extension is happy to host another BEAD mapping webinar for you today. I'm Nancy Wodrago, State Specialist in Community and Economic Development, and we're happy to welcome Devon Braunstein and Shubhika Agarwal, who will tour us through the BEAD challenge process and discuss how to submit challenges and more. And they're going to field your questions at the end of the presentation during a Q&A. So we really thank you both for returning to our platform this week and continuing this outreach. And I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thanks so much. And thanks for bearing with the technical difficulties. Looks like we have some more folks hopping on from the other link, so we'll make sure to get that right next time. But thanks again for your patience. I'm Devon from the Illinois Office of Broadband. So this is part of our January series of sessions where we'll be digging into some topics related to the challenge process as we get closer and closer to that expected launch date of around January 29th. So today we're going to focus on bulk challenges and go through some of the templates that you'll use to submit a bulk challenge. So first we'll recap the challenge process, go through some of those basics in case there are new folks here. Then we'll do a deep dive into the bulk challenge template walkthrough. So we have a couple of CSV documents and we'll go through some of those key terms. And then we'll go on to next steps and Q&A. All right, so objectives. After this webinar, participants will again know what the BEAD challenge is, why it's important and how to participate, be familiar with current and upcoming resources, and understand the components that make up a bulk challenge and where to find required documents and data points. So first we'll start with our BEAD challenge process recap and updates. I hope this is review for everyone by now, so I won't spend too much time here, but Illinois was allocated $1.4 billion to connect all unserved and underserved locations to broadband over the next 5 years. The goal is to ensure universal coverage across the state, prioritizing fiber wherever possible. There will be a 1-year period where the state will select sub-grantees, and following that, we'll have 4 years to do a full implementation of the program. The broadband implementation will have a low-cost option as well as a middle-class affordability plan. And to recap kind of where we are in this broader BEAD process. So we're right about between the third and the fourth panel here. So we submitted our initial proposal, volume 1, we completed curing, and we're hoping that we'll see approval in the coming couple of weeks. And this is that big milestone that once we receive approval from NTIA of our initial proposal, volume 1, that gives us the green light to start the challenge process. And to kind of double click into that challenge process step, we're tracking towards the same dates that we shared last week. So last week we went over a review of the BEAD challenge map, which we're looking to launch by this Monday, January 22nd. And following that, roughly a week later, opening that official challenge process. Of course, this is based on receiving NTIA approval for our initial proposal, volume 1. The challenge process will be open for between 2 and 3 weeks. And then following the close of the challenge process, we'll be organizing all of those challenges and then sharing them with internet service providers who will have the opportunity to submit rebuttals. We'll accept all of those and then finally go into adjudication and make final determinations around the broadband map. And once we publish that final map in the spring, that'll be locked in and that'll define where BEAD funding goes over the next 5 years. So challenge process is key to getting the map right and making those corrections while we have this small but important window. Here's a recap of the challenge process. So what is the purpose of it? We want to ensure that the state's broadband map accurately reflects residents' home or your organization's access to broadband accurately. And then this will inform which locations are eligible for funding. Who can submit challenges? There are 3 eligible entities who can directly participate in the challenge process. This is units of local government, nonprofit organizations, and internet service providers. We're also giving individuals the chance to participate by way of a nonprofit. So individuals can take speed tests at beadchallenge.org, and then those speed tests will be submitted through a local nonprofit. What can be challenged? So once this BEAD map is live on Monday, any location that you see on the map is up for grabs to be challenged. So if you see something that is incorrect about that location in terms of the speed, the latency, the technology, then you can submit a challenge for that location. And then when will the challenge process be held? We're looking at around January 29th. And again, this is based on when we get NTIA approval to start the challenge process. So just kind of stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize that date as soon as we can. All right, so again, a little bit of review here, but what does the challenge process look like? So the first step is pre-registration. We have hundreds of pre-registrations, which is fantastic engagement already. As a reminder, pre-registering is required to participate in the challenge process. Then the second step is accessing and kind of poking around on this interactive map to check out your locations of interest and see their eligibility status. And then finally, actually submitting your challenges in the portal. So last week we walked through what that challenge map looks like, and then how you can use that to select a location or more than one location to bring that over to the portal and make your submission. Next week, we'll have a deeper live demo of the map. And then the following week, if we are on target and on schedule, we'll be able to demo that full end-to-end process of how the challenge portal looks. So as a reminder, and again, I would say if you were not at last Friday's webinar, we have a great recording and the slides online where we kind of went through the different features of this map. But just to recap, to submit a challenge, a user must have a broadband serviceable locations location ID. This comes directly from a data set called the FCC Fabric. And some folks may already have access to the Fabric. But many folks won't. And so if the Fabric doesn't sound familiar to you, or you've been waiting on access, that is where this map comes into play. So we encourage folks, if you're an individual on behalf of a nonprofit or maybe an organization that does not have access to the Fabric, this map will come in handy because you can select a location directly from the map and carry it over to the portal with that required information. So once you're on the map, you can look for a location, you can search for its eligibility status, see what broadband service is available, and then originate your challenge from the map. And again, we like to share this at the beginning of all of our calls because these terms are really critical to kind of understanding everything that's to come. So broadband serviceable location, BSL, is a residential or business location on the map. Unserved, underserved, and served. This is where we hit those three thresholds of unserved, meaning you do not have access to basic broadband service, which is 25 over 3 megabits per second. Underserved means that you may have access to 25 over 3, but not quite 100 over 20 megabits per second, which is that second level. And then served means that your household or your institution does have access to at least 100 over 20 megabits per second or higher. A community anchor institution, or a CAI, is at the broadest level, an institution that provides critical services and support to residents, particularly those in underrepresented communities. The exact definition of a CAI is being finalized in that initial proposal, volume 1. So look out for that, as well as the full list of CAIs, which will be posted online soon. A multi-dwelling unit, or MDU, is a structure with multiple but separate housing units. So basically an apartment building with at least 2 units in it. And finally, latency is the time it takes for data to go to a server and back to your connection. And if you have high latency, it can cause your video conferences or meetings like this to be choppy or freeze. So we're really looking for latency that is 100 milliseconds or lower. And anything higher than that may be eligible to be challenged as underserved. So a final reminder to pre-register for the challenge process. This is required to participate in the challenge process. because we will send you credentials to actually log into the challenge portal. And why is this required? One, we'll send you information on key dates, so when the challenge process is opening and closing, and two, to verify that you are indeed an eligible entity to participate in the challenge process. Individuals can also pre-register, but more for that earlier piece of just getting up-to-date communications. One flag that we shared last week to make sure that everyone knows is that pre-registration is not required in advance of the challenge process, but it is strongly encouraged. So we had an initial deadline of last Friday. This deadline is now extended. We will take rolling pre-registrations during the challenge window, but then we'll have to kind of take your information, generate your credentials to log into the portal, and then send them to you. So it won't be instantaneous. And for that reason, really strongly encourage you to register ahead of time. And we'll be sending out that second batch of confirmations that you have pre-registered later today. So if you have not received one yet, expect one later today. And finally, always want to highlight our landing page. This is the, if you have any questions at all, this is the place to go. So dceo.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge. We have all of our past webinars, recordings, slides, resources, everything you need to know will be at this link. So screenshot it, bookmark it. Highly recommend that you do that. All right, so now we'll get into the meat of today's conversation, and this is the bulk CSV walkthrough. So I want to do a quick review of what can you actually challenge, because there is a lot here. So I'm going to kind of walk through these at a high level, and I know we've gone over these in previous webinars, and so if you did want to dig into any of them in more detail, feel free to drop a question in the chat or unmute at the end of this meeting. So the first is availability. This basically means you're challenging that service is or is not available at a location. So let's say the map says that your house has access to 100 over 20, and in your experience it doesn't, you may challenge on the basis of availability. On speed, this one you can challenge the actual speed that's available. Latency, in this case, you might challenge the latency that's available. So if the round trip latency of the broadband service is more than 100, that might be an eligible challenge. Data cap, we're looking for service plans marketed to consumers that pose an unreasonable capacity allowance or a data cap. Technology, if you see that the technology indicated for the location is incorrect, you might submit a challenge. And business service only, a location is residential, but the service offered is marketed or only available to businesses. So you don't actually have a residential service option. Plan service, this is likely coming from either an internet service provider or someone else who has a planned broadband project. If you know that there will be a broadband deployment by June 30th of 2024, you would submit a challenge around plan service. And then part of an enforceable commitment or not part of an enforceable commitment. This is based on projects funded by other sorts of funding sources to make sure that we're not funding the same area twice. So if there is a project being funded by a state grant or a federal grant, hopefully all of that will be covered in the map that you do see next week. But if not, you can submit a challenge to make sure that the state does have all of the up-to-date, accurate information. Last category, community anchor institutions. You can say that a location should be classified as a community anchor institution that might not be, and vice versa. If there is a location classified as a CAI, but you have a correction, maybe it is something else, you would submit a challenge there. And then finally, speed. If a community anchor institution is marked as eligible on the map or is marked as ineligible on the map, but you would like to challenge that status based on whether or not gigabit symmetrical service is available to that CAI, you can submit a challenge for that. All right, so to recap, there will be two ways that folks can submit challenges directly. The first is by visiting that BEAD challenge map, which we expect to be live on Monday, January 22nd, going in and selecting a location or using the lasso tools to select a group of locations, clicking submit challenge, and then carrying it over to that portal. Or you can use the FCC fabric data. So if you are an internet service provider or a government entity who already has access to the fabric data, which is a location data set from the FCC, you can skip over that BEAD map and go directly to the challenge portal. But in order to structure your challenges in a way that they are valid and organized and make sense, we are going to guide you through some template CSVs, so spreadsheets, that you can use to submit your challenges. So who is the bulk challenge for? If folks do have access to that FCC fabric and thus the location IDs, this is specifically geared towards you. If you have access to these location IDs and you want to submit a large number of challenges, again, this bulk challenge process using the template CSVs is probably going to be most helpful and most relevant for you. I will share one caveat that it is possible to use the BEAD challenge map and write down or copy and paste the location ID or even download a set of locations and then go through the bulk challenge process. So there's a couple different use cases. So I want to make sure that folks understand who should be really paying close attention to this process. But really, it's if you want to submit a lot of challenges, this is for you. So highlighting again that each challenge type has a code, because this will be one of the fields that is required on, I think, all of the CSV templates. And so we're going to be talking through a lot of different data points that may seem, it may seem like a lot. And so what I wanted to share is that we're going to be consolidating and compiling all of these different tables and codes in one place in a user guide and on the landing page. So when you're actually working on your bulk templates and submitting a challenge, you have that information in front of you and you don't need to be, going to search in various PDFs. So just take note of the codes and the challenge types. It's mostly intuitive. A, availability. S, speed. As you get down the list, it's a little bit trickier, but for at least those likely most common ones, it is usually the first letter of the word. So that is good to know. All right, so for the bulk challenge types, we will have roughly 6 or 7 CSV templates. 6 of these templates will be specific to a challenge type. So what you'll see on our website is an opportunity to select the challenge type that you are looking to submit, and then just going to that CSV template most relevant to what you're trying to do. The reason why we made this decision is because we don't want folks having to be concerned or not know which fields they should fill in and which fields they shouldn't fill in. So for example, if you are submitting an availability challenge, this screenshot down here is what you'll see, and you only need to fill in just these fields that we've included. So on the left-hand side here, you can see all of the individual CSVs, and then there will be one final kind of catch-all CSV for these 3 challenge types that just universally share all of the same fields. And then on the top right, you can see what it looks like when you download a zip file of all of the CSVs. You'll be able to just, download them, click into there, and open one up. One flag is that the CAI challenges are a little bit trickier, so we're in the process of finalizing what those will look like before we share them with you. Another flag before we get into the CSVs, many of the templates will require you to indicate a technology code. So again, we'll have this mapping on our website and available in a resource guide, but you'll see there's a code associated with each type of technology, and then we have some definitions here. All right, so now we're going to walk through these 7 CSVs that we have available right now that we'll make available for download soon. So the first type is availability, challenge type A. If you want to challenge that broadband service identified on the map is actually not offered at the location, including in an apartment or a unit of a multi-dwelling unit, this is the CSV that you would download. And then these are the fields that you'll see in the columns. So challenge type, again, you'll pull that code. In this case, it's just A. Location ID, this will be pulled directly from the FCC Fabric data, or if you are poking around that BEAD challenge map, you'll be able to see the location ID associated with each location on the map. The FCC provider ID, this is a unique 6-digit code generated by the FCC for each internet service provider. So if you are an ISP, you may have this yourself, but for everyone's ease, we will be publishing a table of these provider IDs available on the website and in the user guide, so you can just pull them down and apply those conveniently. Technology code, again, this is that table we just saw. So based on the technology available at the location, you'll be able to input the specific code. Building unit, if you're submitting a challenge for an apartment or a specific suite within a larger building, this is where you would put that apartment number, unit number, suite number, etc. And then finally, a reason code. This is specific to an availability challenge type. There's a handy table here that, again, we'll have in the user guide and on the website. So you would select one reason from this table and just indicate the number corresponding with the reason that is relevant to your challenge. So for example, if you said reason code number 4, provider denied request for service, putting this in a scenario, you may have called up a provider and requested 100/20 megabits per second service. If they said no, you can document that and then pull that into your evidence and then use challenge code number 4. Speed, I think, will be another common challenge type. So a speed challenge means that the actual speed of service falls below either unserved or underserved. So you'll look at how the location is reflected on the map, and if your experience is different than that, you may submit a speed type challenge. So running down the columns in the CSV, the first is the challenge type. So in this case, speed, challenge type S, not too hard. Again, location ID from the FCC Fabric or pulled from that broadband map. FCC provider ID will have a table available for you. Same with technology code. Building unit, same thing if you're challenging for a specific apartment or unit in a building. And then the last two are unique for speed. So your measured download speed and your measured upload speed. This is if you are taking a speed test and you conduct 3 speed tests over 3 days and you're submitting them in bulk, you'll want to make sure that you're documenting each of the results of each of those 3 speed tests. And this will be the median of those results. Latency. So if the latency that you see on your speed test is greater than 100 milliseconds, you may want to submit a challenge. The first, let's see, 5 rows here are the same as the previous ones. The unique row for latency that you'll want to make sure you get is the latency as measured through a speed test. So you can use beadchallenge.org to take that speed test, or you can use another speed test platform and you'll see the latency on there. All right. Data cap are, oh, Shubhika was. I'll pass to you.
Sure, thanks, Devon. So yeah, I'm going to be describing some of the fields required for the other challenge types that we have on here. So with data cap, this is when, as Devon mentioned earlier, the provider is imposing an unreasonable capacity allowance, meaning a data cap on the service for the consumer. Again, if they do offer a package that does not have that unreasonable cap, then you wouldn't be able to if you're subscribing to a lower data cap service just because of affordability. That wouldn't be a valid challenge. And again, that cap is defined as 600 GB per month. So if it falls below that, then that would be when one would file for a data cap challenge type. This is type D, so that's going to be the first thing we fill in the challenge type column. The location ID, as Devon mentioned, is again either coming from the BEAD challenge map or the FCC fabric data. There's going to be the list that we put out for the FCC provider ID. So that's going to be handy for any nonprofits or local governments who are filling this out on behalf of their residents. And then there's the technology code. Again, we had that table, but the BEAD challenge map will also have information on the technology offered by that specific provider at that location. So if you're unsure of what technology is really available, that could also be a source to find that information. And we'll also need the building code if the location is like a multi-dwelling unit. So this would be the unit number, apartment number, or suite number. And in addition to this, there's going to be this next step on evidence, which would be the screenshot of a provider website or any description that describes the service and indicates that data cap that is imposed. With planned service, so this is mostly a type that would be filed by an internet service provider. So if they have knowledge that there's going to be broadband that meets speed requirements being deployed at this location by June 30th, 2024, this would be the kind of challenge that they would have to file. Challenge type being P in this case for planned service. The location ID can be pulled from the P challenge map or the FCC fabric data. This is mostly going to be a provider filling out this kind of challenge, so they should have access to their provider ID. And in either case, we'll have that list available. Technology code based on the technology that they have planned for that specific location. The codes are going to be available in the resources that we share, but this is going to be based on the service that is actually planned by the provider for that location. And the next two fields would be the planned download speed and the planned upload speeds. So we'd want this in megabits per second, again, based on the provider's plan for the service that they want to make available at these locations. The next type, the enforceable commitment. So this is, we've already incorporated a lot of data from the federal funding programs and from Connect Illinois, the state broadband infrastructure program as well, where ISPs have already received these awards and are under obligation to get speeds and technology that meet with BEAD requirements. So we have some of that incorporated on the map, and they would be reflected as having enforceable commitment. But if we have missed out on some of those locations, that is when a provider would file an enforceable commitment type E challenge. So that would be the challenge type. The location ID, again, available through the BEAD challenge map or the fabric. The FCC provider ID will have the list, or again, because this is something that the provider is going to be filing, they should have access to their provider ID. Technology code is again, based on what the enforceable commitment wants the provider to actually provide at that location. So that's going to be the specific technology code that they refer to, and the committed upload and download speeds. So this is again based on that specific state or federal grant program. What are the upload and download speeds that the provider is obligated to be making accessible at these locations? So that's going to be these other two fields. And I'm going to pass it on to Devon again for closing out on the other types.
Great, thank you, Shubhika. So like I mentioned, there are 3 challenge types that all share the same elements, data points that you're required to provide. So for the ease of everyone, we'll label this CSV as such. So if you're submitting a technology challenge, a challenge that a location is not part of an enforceable commitment, even if it is listed as one on the map, or if there is only business service available, this final CSV will be the one to look at. So this should probably be the most straightforward CSV. You'll need that challenge type again, whether that's T, N, or B, the location ID, the provider ID, and then the technology code. And so all of this will come along with evidence. So you'll have an opportunity to upload evidence. So we'll be going through that in a later webinar. And just to flag again, the CAI challenge templates will be slightly different. And so we'll also be sure to get those out to you and feature them in another webinar. And so with that, we'll recap some next steps, but then happy to pause for questions, dig into anything a little bit further. I think we have our University of Chicago team here who's helping us develop this portal. So happy to answer any questions that folks have. So a couple of reminders of next steps. Make sure you're pre-registering for the challenge process, particularly if you are an ISP, a local government entity, or a nonprofit who thinks that you want to actually submit challenges directly. Make sure that you're pre-registered. If you have not gotten a confirmation email, expect one today. And then we'll be following up before January 29th with your credentials to actually log into the challenge portal. If you are an individual resident, you are welcome to pre-register to get that up-to-date information, but you can also go ahead and start taking speed tests as soon as now at beadchallenge.org. Upcoming webinars, we're anticipating that next week we'll be able to share a demo of the BEAD map, which we showed in more static screenshots last week. Then we'll have the portal user guide available, and we'll do a full end-to-end walkthrough, likely the following week, of what you can expect from visiting the map, selecting a location, going to the challenge portal, and actually going through the steps of uploading your evidence and submitting a challenge. So more to come on that. And then just highlighting the Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter. We might be able to get a link in the chat for that, but that's really the best way to know about the latest webinars and information. And then of course, checking back on the landing page, dceo.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge. And with that, we can pause for questions, and I might just start in the chat here and go down the line. All right, so first question is, Kelly asked, is there a process for a community college or school district to become a CAI? So Kelly, next week, you'll be able to actually look at the BEAD challenge map yourself, and you'll be able to see whether they are on there and reflected as a CAI. It's likely that they are. You'll also be able to see, check out a spreadsheet where we'll just have a full list of all CAIs and their category that will be made available next week as well. And then you'll be able to, if something is categorized as a household or a business, and you believe it is a CAI, you'll be able to submit a challenge to make sure that it is properly categorized. Next, we have a question, is the challenge portal link available on the DCEO website? So the challenge portal is not live yet. This is the one that we are waiting on our final approval from the federal government, from NTIA. Our initial proposal, volume 1, which outlines this whole process and how the state is going to approach it, is under final review. So we expect approval around the 29th. And as soon as we have that green light, all of you will be the first to know if you're pre-registered, and the challenge window will officially open. So the key dates to remember are around January 29th. It could be a few days after that, depending on when we receive approval. And then January 22nd, next Monday, we're tracking towards having the challenge map go live. So you can't submit challenges yet, but you can look around the map and check the eligibility status of locations of interest. Okay, I see Shubhika answered this question. I'll just verbalize it. So if you would like to take a speed test now, you can visit beadchallenge.org. And if you are a community organization or an individual, we have some materials on our landing page that specifically walk through that process, sort of geared towards someone who may not be familiar with taking a speed test and what it all means. So we'll make sure to send out those links, but definitely encourage you to check out those trainings. All right, we have a question about login credentials. If we registered twice, do we both receive credentials or just one per entity? So I'll recap on the steps. Step one is completing pre-registration. This is a simple form where you list out your name, your information, what organization you're associated with. We'll ask for an EIN from nonprofits and an FRN from internet service providers. Then we'll, on our end at the Office of Broadband, go in and confirm that list looks good. And then we'll send you a confirmation email that, yes, we've received your registration. Then step two is we go in and actually validate to make sure that you are who you say you are. So once we confirm that you have a valid EIN or FRN, we'll send a confirmation to the team at University of Chicago working on the portal, and they will generate a username and a temporary password for you, and that'll arrive in your inbox. So you'll be prompted to go through a few steps to set up your account, and at that point, you'll be ready to access the challenge portal. So kind of that two-step process. You can have more than one person from the same entity pre-register if you think you're both going to be submitting challenges or you both want access to the portal. So you will receive different login usernames and passwords.
And I did receive a direct question as well. So this is a first-time participant, and how can I access previous Zoom recordings? So as Devon mentioned, we have a lot of these recordings around BEAD Challenge on the BEAD landing page that we shared. And there's also a playlist, YouTube playlist that the University of Illinois Extension basically manages that has all of these webinars all in one place. So those are the two different places you can look them up. Devon just posted the link to the DCEO landing page, which has all of these recordings and slides. So that would be a good place to get started and familiarize yourself with all that has happened in, like, the introduction and all the things that you have to do. So, yeah.
And I will say, if you are new to this process, we try and balance getting to the new content, but doing some review at the beginning. So if you have feedback, and most of you have been here before, please feel free to reach out and email us. We're very open to your feedback. If you are new and this was overwhelming, we're happy to set up a one-on-one conversation to just kind of walk through and answer your questions if you don't want to ask them in the big group. So, happy to make this work for everyone. Any questions about those CSVs or any of the terms? All right. Well, if that's it, then I think we can go ahead and close out. I want to make sure I have the right link here. So if folks give me one moment, I can make sure I do. I'll throw that in the chat right now. Great. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thanks all for listening. And feel free to follow up with any feedback or questions. But otherwise, we will see you, I believe, next Wednesday at noon for the BEAD map demo.
Thank you, Shubhika and Devon. Yep, I will see you next Wednesday here, same time, January 24th, Wednesday. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.